Okay. So did I tell you what I wanted to talk about?
You said
Because
that
whatever I
well,
said, it's not
you
what I
listed a
want to talk
couple of
about.
things. Okay, great. Go for it.
Sorry.
It was good stuff, but yeah,
Um,
what do you got?
okay, well, let's just get straight into I want to talk about I want to talk about the feminine. I want to talk about how like the feminine is real. What?
That's just great. Yeah, go for it. Keep on going.
Okay. Um, so see, I moved to Orthodoxy, you moved to Catholicism, and
Hmm.
there's something that we share, which is we venerate the Mother of God. There's something that
Yes.
we didn't grow up with that we've kind of like moved into, which is
Hmm.
venerating the Mother of God. Believing, I think there's something to that of like believing that the feminine is real. I don't have like
Yeah.
cogent thoughts, really. I have a bunch of things,
Yeah.
rants and stuff I want to talk
Ooh,
through, but I want to hear, yeah, I want to hear your perspective. Just,
good night.
well, I'll just
Okay.
start with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, again, there's 5 or 6 ways I could go immediately. But the first one, just because of the relevance of it. So yesterday was the Feast of the Holy Family, right? So we're coming to the end of Christmas. The 12 days of Christmas. Epiphany was Saturday, and um, so the during the liturgy that yesterday we're meditating on the Holy Family, and so our priest is talking about the hierarchy of the family, the earthly hierarchy of the Holy Family, right? Where you have Saint Joseph, who's given to guard and rule over the Blessed Virgin and the Child Christ. And the scripture reading is from the passage in let's see, is it the Gospel according to Saint Matthew, where Christ is the child Christ goes up to the temple with his parents, and then he stays behind, and they find him. And the end of that, it says, right, and then he went back with them, and there's this little sort of summary statement of basically everything leading up to his ministry, which is that he put himself under them, right? He submitted to his parents, and and grew in stature and wisdom and favor with both God and men, or something like that. And so, as I was sitting there thinking about it, he's talking about how there's this hierarchy, but the let's say the holiness or the sanctity of those persons is actually the reverse of the earthly hierarchy, right? Christ is God, right? And so in that sense, he's infinitely beyond and above any any creature, right? And the Blessed Virgin and Saint Joseph are both creatures, but he's submitting himself to both of them. And then the Blessed
Hmm.
Virgin is of so much greater glory and honor than Saint Joseph, being the Theotokos, right? The God bearer. And so there's this really interesting. The reason I want to get in right start right there is that one of the difficulties that we have about femininity,
The
and
what?
even seeing about the feminine and
Yeah.
even seeing it, is that it doesn't its value, let's say, comes forth in ways that aren't lined up with what we're used to seeing. So like
Hmm.
the most obvious way to see things is like, well, what's most visible, right?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah,
that's
like the
like,
tree.
it's tautological. Yeah, it's tautological, but it's just I there's this interesting I had this interesting realization. I used to bird watch a lot. I still love seeing birds. I don't really go out and do that anymore. Um, but there's this weird realization that I had this weird realization that like your capacity to like recognize whether or not a bird is in the area is like dependent on how much it's like showing itself forth, how much it's singing, right? Where it is like in the
Hmm.
vegetation. And so if a bird like doesn't sing much, there might be twice as many of them there as this other bird that's like very, like a mockingbird that really like puts itself out there. Um, and so if you don't have the right, if you don't have, if you can't, if you don't have eyes to see, let's say, we can take that language,
Hmm.
then the outward orientation of masculinity is going to be obvious in a way that the feminine isn't going to
Hmm.
be. Because and I think about this a lot in terms of like a properly ordered household, right? I'm over here, busting stuff up,
Yeah.
and I want to I want to particularly state that this is the way things are ordered. Obviously, the way it works out in particulars is can be very different for many reasons. But generally, right, the order is something like I am engaged in sort of external active work, and like my wife, generally, particularly because we're having children, she's doing this sort of internal work that you can't see, right? You can't see like a baby gestating in a womb. Not natural. I mean, you can come up with tools that give you pictures of it, like an ultrasound device or something like that. But like when I when I do like when I rip the ceiling out of this house, right, or the floor or something like that, or I build a car, or I whatever the thing is, that I'm
Hmm.
doing, it's obvious and it's visible. Whereas the the things that general like well, for one, gestation is it's just something that women can do. Like that belongs to the feminine utterly, and it's necessarily hidden. But likewise, the work of say the development of the nurturing of the character of a child, which obviously the masculine has a role in too, but that's also a hidden thing, right? You don't see, it's a harder
Hmm.
thing to see. So one of the first things about like recognizing the feminine is that it's just harder to see. It's not as obvious. And so if you don't have humility, which is the capacity to see reality as it is, then you won't be able to see the feminine. And so I think there's a reason that, the more prideful society is, the easier it is for it to disregard the feminine. So
Mm,
that does you can take it in any direction you want to go, but that was kind of like a my
totally.
first lead off there.
Yeah.
Um, which has a lot also to do with why I think the Blessed Virgin, we don't see a lot of what she says in Scripture, right? Like what we're given in the Holy
Mm,
Scriptures, like they're really impactful if you will meditate on them, but there's
right.
just not like she has a hidden life in the Gospels.
Yeah. She shows up like a couple of times and it completely changes everything. And she like frames Christ or she frames Christ's ministry. But yeah,
Yeah.
you have to be able to perceive it, or perceive the
Hmm.
importance of it. So, okay, so I'm gonna simplify. Um, okay, so you talked about the feminine is harder to see. So do you think that the feminine, this is gonna sound quite Peugeotian. Do you think that the feminine has to do with um like the framing of things? I mean, obviously, like it's like the womb. So I'll give you a couple analogies. I mentioned the tree. Like what you see is the tree, and it's like, yeah, yeah, that came from the seed. Well, you don't realize that, yeah, actually, the seed needed good ground in order to grow into a tree. And so there's like, yes, there's the seed which carries the identity of treeness, but without ground, like the seed does
Hmm.
not actually turn into tree. And it's not just, I'm not talking about dirt. I'm talking about all of the framing of that seed. So yes, the dirt, the rain, time. It's like all of the things that make seed into tree, all the ways that it turns that child into like its fuller identity. The actual identity of treeness, in a way, does come from seed. Like there's a way in which the father names, but the mother frames.
Yeah.
How does that
Well,
sound to
we
you?
even have so I mean one of the great realizations to have is that if you look at so this coming out of the Aristotelian tradition of viewing reality as being hylomorphic, right? That things are composed of a formal cause and a material cause
Yes,
together.
that's kind of, well, that's what I'm getting
In
at.
the case, right? So when you say material cause, that's actually the same root as maternal, right?
Hmm.
So that connection is embedded in
And
language.
pattern
That
is from as paternal. It's like pattern
yes,
and matter.
yes,
Everything that
pattern and
exists,
matter
yeah, everything that exists is
always.
that meeting. And do you think, okay, so here's what I want to here's one of the things I wanted to ask. Do you think there's like pattern and matter coming together is how being exists? Like obviously for either one of us to exist, it was the father and the mother, and it was like the pattern of the seed meeting the matter. There's a form and material. There's like
Hmm.
there's a we are like mind and matter. Oh man, I'd love to talk to you about duality. Okay, so that's in the back of my mind. Talk to you about duality. I don't think duality is real. I think there's only like monism or trialism, but we'll get to that later. Um, I don't think Descartes is like bad because he's a dualist. I think Descartes bad because he's a homewrecker. Okay, so now we'll remember that and get back to it later. Okay, so okay, so I want to say like there's mind and there's matter, and anything that has being has that. Now, do you think here's what I was thinking about over the weekend? I was thinking about being also relies on this meeting of past and future, like the now. And there's a way in which I feel like the past resonates with like the spirit of the Father and like the actual, and the future is the potential. Like
Yes.
there's not like kind of I want to say like factually speaking, there's no fact or no proof I could give you for why something crazy doesn't happen in like the next 5 seconds. Like we think that the future is going to be a certain thing, but like the sun could explode for some reason that we didn't understand, and that's just it for like our solar system and whatever, right? And so
Yes. Yeah.
the future is potential. And so do you think there's a relation between like being is the meeting of masculine and feminine? It's the meeting of potentiality and actuality. And there's a way in which the past is kind of like the father in the sense that the past is the actual and it's defined,
Yes.
but
Yes.
it's going to be like I want to say like anything that is the meeting of past and future, like the now, the beingness of it. Um, so I'll start
Yes.
there.
So
So okay, two
yeah.
things.
So
Here, let me
you're
break it up into two though. One is, do you think
okay.
that we can relate masculine and feminine to actuality and potentiality? And then the second is, do you think we can relate it to past and future? And then I want to talk in that about if the feminine is real, do we need to give like is part of the problem with our kind of current culture that ontologically we don't think potentiality is real and we don't think that feminine is real?
Yes. Oh, okay. I'm gonna go with you said that was two, but that might have been three. I'm
It
gonna
was.
start with the. I'm gonna start with the. I'm gonna start with the past present. So
Okay.
the first thing that I would say is that when your identification with the past with a father is actually pulling straight from Saint Augustine.
Okay.
So he has this amazing like triad where he maps past, present, and future with the persons of the Holy Trinity,
Really?
also with the yes, with his like three his triplex, I think triplex sin of let me see, pride, lust, and curiositas, and then the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. So he sees like all three of those basically as like you or all of those as being things that you can move in those directions. So why is the past connected with the father, connected with faith? Because exactly as you said, it's where identity comes from, right? So this and the son is begotten by the father. Um, in the be you there's this sense of right in the beginningness about God the Father. You even sort of see that and don't hear this as modalist at all, whatever you do, but there is a sense in which the persons of the Trinity even kind of take that in the Holy Scriptures, and that like the identity of God the Father is most clearly seen in the Old Testament, and then God the Son in the Gospels, and then God
Mm-hmm.
the Holy Ghost later on in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And in the church.
but and in the church, yes. So right, I love that. I mean, and that I think that has a tradition behind it to look and see, and even thinking about like the genealogies tend to be paternal genealogies, right? There's this
Mm-hmm.
sense
Yeah, yeah.
of right. Okay, so the notion of future and the connection between future and femininity. I mean, there's a couple of things that spring out to me as being obvious connections there. One of them is like it's through the feminine, the future of the human race and of every race, of every creature comes about is through the feminine aspect, that generative feminine aspect. Um, there's a great book and movie combo, The Children of Men. Have you ever seen or read? Okay,
No.
very different. And the movie and the book are very different, same sort of basic concept, both great. The book P.D. James wrote back in the 80s. But basically, the idea is that women just stop being able to have children. It's like 25 years into this world where it's never explained, but for some reason, there's no more babies. And you realize that, like, there's this interesting thing about if you are a 45-year-old person, affluent person, like, and you don't think, oh, I want to have children. You think I'm just going to enjoy, like, it seems to me that if I don't have children, I'll experience more pleasure in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a predominant notion in our society. And yet P.D. James brings out really, I think, subtly the way that everything is banked on the fact that there's going to be another generation.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you stop
Mm-hmm.
having that next generation, it's like, we don't repair the roads. The houses are falling down. People are
Mm-hmm.
depressed. People are unemployed. there's this real sense in which the present persists by the possibility of the future.
Hmm.
And so it's not merely like that in the future there will be people to continue the human race, but like now we need that possibility of the future. Um, and so there's this, that's one aspect of the connection between the feminine and the future. The other is, and you've is the sort of order chaos thing between the
Mm,
masculine
yeah,
and the
yeah.
feminine, which I know people get all up in a tizzy about the association with the feminine and chaos. And I think it's because people see chaos as negative because chaos can't be controlled,
Yeah.
right? And so in a society that is predominantly about pride, there's a necessity for control. And
Mm,
so we denigrate because chaos in that sense is there's like chaos in the sense of destruction. There's also chaos in the sense of what can't be known, like what can't be predicted,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
hidden. You almost the hidden might and 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 then this connection, the ancient connection between chaos and the ocean. You think about the ocean as this thing that like brings stuff forth, and you
Mm,
can't see into it. It's opaque to you, but it brings things forth. It brings forth fish. It brings
yeah.
storms. It brings invaders. Okay, but now think about what's happening in the actual process of the conception of and birth of a child, right? You're talking about potentiality, and to just say yes, I agree with you. The fact that we think that potentiality doesn't exist is a grave error, is a serious error.
Mm,
You think about like the things that I could do, right? So I could that um I have a certain number. I could start a business, right, and that would have some downstream effects. It would alter the future,
yeah.
right? I could write a paper, an academic paper. I could write a book. I could. There's all these things that I could do. I could commit a crime, and they have some meaning that I don't know yet. It's going to unfold in the future. Okay, but I would argue that there's nothing that I can do that has more potentiality than any human child because they could be anyone, right? Think about the
Yeah.
individuals, the people who have most impacted the course of history, and it's like any child is possibly that, and then more so. And so there is this sense in which like the process of like begetting and bringing forth a human child is the greatest act of chaos in the sense of you don't know what it's going to do
Hmm.
that is available to people
Hmm.
like as humans like that. If you're talking about like possible downstream effects, there is no more potent act
Yeah.
than than to have a child.
Yeah. And like on the flip side of that, if we really wanted 100% order, the only way to do that is to like castrate all the kids, like get rid of
which is what
the, which is what we're
we're
doing.
which is what we're doing.
Okay, then people say politics is downstream from culture, and I'm like, okay, dude, just go upstream like a bit more. You get to religion, but that religious practice go upstream a bit more, and there's like a, it's not a doctrine, but there's like a fundamental spirit or something like that, and you can tell me what you think or how we could talk about it.
Okay.
But it's like it's not just like a doctrine as like it's not just the light, it's not just the idea of, oh, now let's just be rational and let's not venerate the mother of God. It's not just a propositional new understanding. It's actually like a whole new way in which everything is being framed. So it's actually kind of like a change of the feminine, which happens, slowly over time, but then generation after generation. Now, a lot of people in the modern world have no, they don't think that potentiality is real. And they don't think that the way that things are framed determines what they are. They don't see the value of that. All they see is the seed. All they see is actuality. And now the world's ending because of that. So I don't know, like I want to say, yes, there's doctrines. Like I can point to the five solas are like hyper masculine and make my little cogent arguments. Um, but at the same time, there's like a fundamental spirit behind it that I
Mm-hmm.
want to, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it kind of grounds out there. There's like that's the ground, that's like the most upstream that we could ever access is like a spiritual
Mm-hmm.
disposition of,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's like a humility and gratitude that says that the feminine is real.
Yeah. If we're trying to name that thing all the way up there, and this is really close to why we've become members of the Catholic Church, is it's that orientation towards what's given of givenness.
Hmm.
And so one of the ways that givenness manifests is in tradition. And so if you reject givenness, you end up rejecting tradition. You And this, I think, actually strikes at something of the point of what you're trying to say about this desire to have, as you're saying, to be grateful for your father.
Hmm.
In all the meanings of
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
is it's the capacity to receive givenness. So there's three or four ways I could state this. One of my favorite ways is actually taking from C.S. Lewis, where he talks about he says if you throw up religion and magic and science and technology on a board and you say put them into groups, people are going to be, oh well, there's religion and magic and there's science and technology. And Lewis says no, 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 no. The fundamental difference is between religion
Religion
and
and
science
science, and then magic and
and magic and
technology.
right, because religion and science are fundamentally about grappling with what is given to us to conform to. Religion obviously being the higher thing because it's about the confirmation of your soul to all of reality, whereas the sciences are about the confirmation of the intellect to what can be known. And
Can you
um,
say that again? I never heard that differentiation, but that sounds really helppful.
oh, between religion and
No, no,
science.
no. Everything that you just said about
Oh, okay,
the
okay.
connection of the known.
So religion and so you have with religion and science, it's about conforming to what's been given to you.
Right.
And in the
Yep.
case of religion, it's about your being, your total being towards what is. And in the
Hmm.
case of science, it's about the confirmation of your conformation, not
Hmm.
confirmation, conformation of your intellect to what's knowable.
Hmm.
That's what science is fun, should be about. Now, there's all sorts of that. I mean, in that sense, I'm really speaking to like the Latin root, meaning like knowledge,
I know.
science
Yeah, yeah.
from like scientia to know, right?
Hmm.
Whereas magic and technology are fundamentally about the alteration of reality. Now, you might have a good telos, you might have a good purpose, and right there are we were given like the garden was given to us to tend. So there's a sense in which we're supposed to bring, let's say, higher telos, teli down to whatever
Mm.
the plural of
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
to take a higher telos and instantiate it, and that God has chosen man as the means to do that and created reality.
Yeah.
But there's also post fall, like there's all kinds of crazy whack stuff that we do with that,
Yeah.
and
Or the
and
fall is
so
that in a way. Sorry, I'm
the
interrupting you.
fall is that, yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fall is that, and then we're given over to lower things, right? To lower things, and we no longer have internally the capacity to conform to what is. And
Hmm.
so when you think about the virtues, like humility is the capacity to see things as they are, right? To accept
Yeah.
things as they are. And I was talking with a friend of mine. He was talking about there's a Sheed, Frank Sheed. His whole thing was sanity and insanity. Insanity is seeing what is and believing that it exists. And insanity is seeing what isn't and believing it exists, or seeing what is and not believing that it exists.
Mm.
And
Yeah, that's good.
so, yeah, so all that to say that that fundamental orientation all the way back, all the way back, what is it? It's I think that fundamentally it's an acceptance of what's given or a rejection of it. Now, what's interesting is that part of what's given is a
Yes. Okay.
an
Sorry.
eschatological vision. It's
You
part of
can't
what you're
keep
given
piling these up, man.
is an eschatological vision
Yeah.
and a moral framework that will cause you to suffer and have to change some act to change certain things in the world around you. That comes with givenness,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you can't just say, "Well, I'm just going to let my child get run over by the car right
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
because it's given." Like I'm given a higher thing, which is to save my child from that.
Yeah.
But to say like I am, and so magic and technology and rebellion all come from the same fundamental orientation that
Yeah.
say
It's pride.
yeah, right, that also rejects tradition.
Yes. 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 Okay. So
Okay, I'm
there's,
gonna take it away. I can keep going, but
I know you could, and like I'm cutting you off because there's so many things stacked up. One, um, I won't be able to talk about this. I would just as a note so that when I listen back to this, everything that you just said, I want to relate it to how Vervaeke talks about um, reality, like an interaction which he terms transjective, that reality is not just objective or subjective. It's not just material, nor is it just like form, not just mind. But everything that exists from the masculine and the feminine, from both mind and matter. And so he talks about all of reality. You have to believe if you want to believe in science and religion. You have to, and just basically to be sane, you have to believe that there is a correspondence between our intellect and like all of the cosmos being intellectually understandable. There's an inexhaustible
Yes.
intelligibility, which is the cosmos. Like the cosmos and us are inexhaustibly intelligible. And that's from Vervaeke. And like that's I remember hearing that and just going, okay, that's the connection between his work and like what I see in the tradition of the church fathers. There's like a connection there that
Yes.
I feel like can actually bridge. Um, he's trying to bridge science and spirituality. That's one thing that was firing. Okay, and then you talked about like this. Uh, you know what? I'm just gonna take it all the way to like the most interesting. I have so many things to like stack up and talk about. Do you think technology is the Antichrist? So here's why I say that. Here's why I say that. There's something about the fall, which is and technology slash magic. There's something about the fall, which is
Hmm.
correspondent to technology. And there's something about, at least I'll say in our generation, the way in which we engage with technology is always about it's the anti-incarnation. The incarnation was the infinite becoming finite, the all-powerful becoming
Hmm.
powerless as a child, and becoming like
Hmm.
subject to the cosmos. And then what we're doing right now with technology, it's all with this drive. When I feel the spirit at the bottom of it, it's this drive to as finite beings to become infinite, and that's so much like the same as eating the fruit. It's like to try and become God. So it's like an anti-incarnation. And so if Christ is this meeting of the Father and the cosmos, maybe that's heretical, but I'll at least say the infinite and the finite, that he is the only begotten of the source of all being, the Father, and he is fully man, so he's fully God and fully man. But what we're doing with technology right now is as finite beings, we are trying to become infinite. Like the core of the technological push is something like, let's live amongst all the
Transhumanism.
stars so that we can live forever. Let's mind upload. And so
Yep.
what's pushing
Yes.
technology feels like the anti incarnation, technically speaking.
Yes. So, oh my goodness, what a what a can of worms right there. Um, well, so one of the first things I'd point out is in the Apocalypse of Saint John, the description of this sort of eschatological pattern of the beast, which comes out of the chaos, and then there's an image, and the image of the beast speaks and performs miracles. So you have this artifact, an artifice that has a demonic origin that
Mm-hmm.
then speaks and brings about miraculous works in this world. And if you wanted to come up with a poetic or visionary description of the works of the hands of man, that would be a pretty concise one. Um, but yeah, that's exactly what's at the back of the drive of Techne. It's and I know that there's a lot of hatred towards Yuval Harari, and I'm not going to weigh in on how valid that is. But his analysis at the beginning of his book Homo Deus that he wrote back in 2017 is basically like, given the fact that we're not scrabbling to survive, here's what man is going to do. And he
Mm-hmm.
basically lays out that like we're going to try to become immortal. We can't become immortal, but we're going to try to become immortal, and we're going to try to bring like consolidate
Did you
as
say
much
amortal? And what does that mean instead of
immortal.
immortal?
So immortal means you can't die. Immortal means you won't necessarily die.
Okay. What's the difference?
So immortal, I could shoot you and you would survive.
Mm-hmm.
Immortal is as long as nothing bad happens to you, you'll never die.
Okay, okay,
So
okay,
you can
yeah.
still like be killed by. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
it's the
I see.
notion of like
Just
radical life
reducing every
extension
way that
technology.
someone's going to kill you.
Yeah, yeah, or your own body, right? If
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can keep your body from ever running down, right? I mean, it's a sci-fi trope.
Hmm.
It's this, this like these people who are, through sophisticated biotechnology and robot and microbiotics and
Hmm.
micro robotics and things like that. There's this life extension such that like if you
Yeah.
don't die,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
basically, well, the elves in the Lord of the Rings are also immortal.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I hear you.
right, they can die in battle, but if they don't die in battle, they'll just live, keep
Yeah,
on
yeah.
living
Hmm.
endlessly. Um,
So how do we
we'll do
escape
that, and then
that?
we'll
Because like we're in the world of eating the fruit. And so how do we
absolutely. I mean,
not like
you
perpetuate
have
that
to
pattern?
you have to and this is not going to sound popular, but you have to come to, well, okay, here's one way to do it. You pray the rosary. All right, because when you pray the Hail Mary, it's Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Which we could get into that part, but I want to
Mhm.
get into the second part of the
Yeah.
prayer, which is Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. And so when you pray a rosary, there's 53 Hail Marys in a rosary. And so 53 times in the rosary, you're praying for the hour of your death. And the fundamental drive, I think, in the spirit of techne, this anti-Christ drive, is the fear of death.
Hmm.
Because if we actually
Yeah.
look, the snake in the garden
Is it
says,
fear of
"Eat this
resurrection
fruit,
too?
you'll."
Sorry, I know I'm being
Yes,
such a
yeah.
bad
Well, it's
conversation
either
partner.
fear of it's either fear of or disbelief in. Those are your two
Okay,
options.
okay,
It's either
okay.
fear
Yeah.
of or disbelief in the resurrection. Because if you believe in what's held forth, which is that in the Gospels and in the Holy Tradition, which is that those who die in grace, that is to say, united with Christ through the incarnation, that they will be raised up to a state that is incomprehensibly blessed, and they will share in the divine nature. They'll have a created share of the divine
Mm.
nature. Like that's how the Catholic Church defines sanctifying grace, which is
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
receive in baptism,
Yeah.
is a created share in the divine nature. They're pulling from the epistles of Saint Peter there, and
Hmm.
in the East, that's called theosis.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah, yeah.
I
His
would
energies.
look.
Yes.
Okay, Matt. So philosophically speaking, you cannot come up with a better outcome for a creature than theosis. You've reached the limit. In fact, it's not even that you can conceive of it. It's something that you can't conceive of. It's like one of those, it's the mathematical expression of infinity, where it's like
Yeah.
it's an uncountable infinity.
Yeah.
Now you could denote it, but and then you can also demonstrate through mathematical means that you can't possibly come up with something larger than an uncountable infinity. Like you've maxed out. And so if you believe in that, then you wouldn't fear death. And so I would say that our fear of death is related to a failure to believe in either the goodness, the power, or the love of God and
Oh,
wisdom of
yeah.
God.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, those
I
are
see
just the
that.
direct correlates. And I say this coming out of like the meditations of my own life of dealing with the fear of death.
Hmm.
And so the degree to which we as a society seek to escape death and suffering is the degree to which we disbelieve in some or all of that. And so in that case, I agree with you that like this is the spirit of the Antichrist being brought forth in the world. And it's this look, anytime in the Old Testament in particular, you see the phrase let us, it's probably something bad is happening. For instance, let us
Mm.
bake bricks and build a tower,
Hmm.
right? It's not looking up to God and saying we're gonna. I
Mm.
think this is also part of the key to the last chapters of Job is that the last friend comes and he says, "Come, let us reason together and decide for ourselves what is good." And everyone's like, "I don't." He seems to be saying good things. I'm like, "Yeah, but his orientation is wrong. He's saying we're going to do
Mm.
it.
Hmm.
We're going to sit here and come up with what's wise."
Mm.
So,
He was a
so
modernist before modernism was cool.
yeah, right. Well, right, because it's like how much of this stuff hasn't been gone through before. So how do you get out of it? You come to accept your finitude as a blessing, and this is one of the fascinating things in the Silmarillion by Tolkien is that the mortality of man is man's gift from the Creator.
Okay. Yeah. That's really good.
So okay, so the answer is you spend your life preparing to die a good death,
Yeah. Okay.
right? And you see this all through the prayers of the East and the West, the Eastern and Western Church. They are about the preparation of the soul for death. Why? Because this isn't all there is. And that to me is the acid test in the end, in my own soul, in my own mind. The degree to which I'm afraid of death is the degree to which I don't actually believe the things that I practice.
Hmm.
And again, belief, there isn't a You do or you
It's a
don't,
trust.
0 or 1. It's a form of trust. Therefore, it's like, and it's an act of the will. The will is involved as well. And so it's not simply I do or I don't. I see it or I don't see it. It's like how much, basically how much of my weight have I put in that boat?
Hmm.
Um, and if you don't have your weight in that boat, you will turn to the tools of this world. Because how could you
Hmm.
not? Either you'll despair or
Yeah.
you'll turn to the tools of the world. Those are your two options. It's transhumanism or suicide, frankly. Like, I think that,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because look, if you don't believe in the immortality of the soul and this union with God in Christ that's held out to us, you are going to try to, if you don't try to end everything, you're going to try to maximize the amount of pleasure that you experience. And the tools that we have created are so much better than the thing that the world of itself holds out to us, because
Hmm.
God, in his mercy, limits the world, right? Think about appetites, right? So because they're disordered, they will just endlessly go after things. Like, there are people who eat themselves to death, people who have, alcohol, drug, porn,
Hmm.
sex addictions, all these addictions, where it's like, if you, at other times in history, like, you'd be pretty limited in terms of what you can get a hold of. But like now
Mm.
we're creating these
Yeah.
tools for, like, the malady of the soul can utterly destroy the body,
Mm.
simply because we have such a capacity to do it. This is, the VR world,
Yeah.
and the
It's also
the
guns.
right. We're now,
It's like I
and it's
sorry.
guns. I mean,
Yeah, I'm putting it onto this whole idea of technology as such. It's like there's a way that like as a modernist, I used to always think about technology as neutral. Oh, it's neutral. It's like money, like you can like use it for good or use it for bad, and it's just there. And
yeah,
but there's also a way in which like you can take that to a limit, which is like I believe that guns are good because it puts power into the hands of individuals. It's like, yeah, but do you want all the powers in the hands of every individual? Would you like it if every single person, including babies, could literally just snap their fingers and the cosmos would disappear? Like, do we want to give an infinity
right. There's a
gauntlet to everybody?
right. Yes, that's such a great point. And so when you look, I see the limitedness of man as one of God's greatest blessings to us, because it gives us a chance for repentance. But that's exactly right. Nick Bostrom's he's an interesting philosopher. He's got this idea of, I say philosopher in air quotes, thinker. He's a computer science guy. He wrote a book on AGI maybe 7 or 8 years ago. But he has an idea that he calls blackball technologies, where it's a technology that is simultaneously massively destructive, um, very simple, and requires and can be built from very easily accessible
Hmm.
things. Right.
Hmm.
So his story, he's built this up with counterfactuals, where he's like, what if atomic weaponry, instead of requiring, like, enriched uranium and, like, high, a huge team of very educated people and an entire industrial military complex,
Hmm.
you could make that out of 2 plates of glass and a battery,
Hmm.
right? But it had the same destructive force as an atomic weapon. He's like, civilization would end, because he
Yeah.
calls it the apocalyptic fringe. He's
It
like,
would
there's
end the first time
always
I got
those.
mad at my kids enough. Like
Yes,
it'd be over.
yes, yeah, right, right. So your limitedness is a blessing, and this is the same thing. It's the capacity to accept your limitedness as a blessing. And there's all sorts of issues with the way that, because we serve Mammon and not Christ, your ability to convince other people that they shouldn't be limited is one of the best ways to acquire their attention and wealth. And so our economic system is driven
Hmm.
by convincing people that they should not be limited.
Hmm.
And if you look at the litanies, the liturgy of the economy, which is advertisements, you will see this over and over and
Hmm.
over. You should never be limited by pain. You should never be limited by age. You should,
Hmm.
your
See,
money
okay,
should allow you to
sorry to interrupt
acquire
you.
more.
Is it the what? Because I want to like I totally see what you're saying, and I totally agree with the point that you're making. But I also want to say, I'll say the exact same sentence, but replace a few words, and all of a sudden it's like theologically a banger. Okay, which is like theosis is our way of existing in an unlimited fashion. It's our way of participating in the energies of God. And so,
Yes,
like by
yes,
me self-sacrificing and creating children and dying so that they can, my identity passes into them, like whatever it is that me and them share, that thing
Mm-hmm.
living forever, which is like love, it's God. I don't know how exactly to talk about it, where it's like the thing that me and all other people share. And also like my particular, I mean, in simple terms, I can just give it my last name. It's like my family pattern. As a Whedon, my children
Mm-hmm.
will be Whedons, and then their children will be Whedons. And there's if I were to identify myself with that thing, then I do want to live in an unlimited kind of a way. And so I feel like the thing that we have to get here is defining what is the me that we're talking about. Because if I want to live, you were talking about like everything becomes corrupt and destroyed once you start wanting to just live in an unlimited fashion. Like me, this atomized
Mm-hmm.
individual, live forever.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
what's the alternative? It's like, how about
Okay,
I
this is
die and then my pattern
yes.
lives on?
Okay, so this is the thing that I think is so critical, and St. Thomas Aquinas and the Dominicans after him have just kept hammering, and I'm so thankful for, is the unity of the transcendentals,
Mhm.
which is
Thank you.
that being
Great.
being and truth and goodness are the same thing. Okay, which means that to leave goodness is to leave being.
Why do you say that? What's important about that? I'm not getting that yet.
Okay, what do I mean by that? I want to, because when you say live forever, you mean your being to continue, right?
Hmm.
Indefinitely.
Hmm.
Okay, so when I do something evil, it actually diminishes my existence.
Yes.
It's not merely that I did something wrong in the sense of
Hmm.
like I got a bad score. No, like my existence diminishes.
What's the
So,
my there? Is it Christ? Like what at the very bottom?
yeah. So is we're talking about there is fundamentally the mystery of the incarnation, which is
Hmm.
if you haven't had this flip in your head, just go ahead and get it, make it happen now. There's two kinds of mysteries that we talk about. One is a murder mystery or a scientific mystery, where once you've figured it out, it ceases to be a mystery. You have
Hmm.
the answer.
Hmm.
There's another kind of mystery, which is a Christian mystery or a
Hmm.
religious mystery, which is something that you never come to the end of, but
Hmm.
continues to deal out in insight, vision, whatever you want to call it. The
Hmm.
incarnation and the Trinity are the two central mysteries of Christianity. They contain, and then
I love
frankly,
you,
in them
man.
they contain everything. And so the
Hmm.
incarnation and the Trinity are the answer to that. You say,
Mysteries.
what's
Oh, I
that?
said to Ken, I said doctrines. Man,
They
I
are
said to
doctrines,
Ken,
but this is the thing. Look, this is the thing when people get down on like dogmas and doctrines, they have
hmm.
this idea that somehow it's like you're being like
Yeah,
restricted
yeah,
or
yeah.
restrained. I'm like, explain to me how the incarnation and the Trinity restrain anything. They
Yeah,
are
yeah. I know,
they're
I know.
bottomless. They're
Yeah.
bottomless.
Mystery is
They're
just such a more beautiful concept. Okay, so this
right.
let me I stopped asking myself how how can I make that relate? I stopped asking myself, is God both fully man and fully human? Instead, I'm trying to call myself and the world up to that question or that mystery where it's like now I have to now try and figure out rather than trying to answer that question, because what the hell would it mean to answer that question? You'd have to know what God is and what man is. Instead, I am trying to take the world and myself and imagine them in such a way that God is both man and fully God and fully man. Does that make sense? And so rather than trying to answer that question,
Yeah, yeah,
and so
yeah. So I don't, maybe I'm just reading something into this that I shouldn't. I do tend to get a little like jittery when people start being like, I don't try to answer that question. I'm like, well, you can answer the question without like the whole problem was with the notion of like just like saying Christ is both fully God and fully man. When you say that, do you believe that you now understand it? Or do you believe that you're simply stating a mystery as it's been given to us to state? Right.
mhm,
In the first one, that's incredibly corrosive and damaging to the soul and to the
yeah,
intellect
and that's what he's
and
talking about.
fostering of pride. Right. But the second one is actually a statement of humility, right? Because when I say given this answer, the same way that Christ was given to us, the same way that my body was given to me, all of these things, I'm not going to stand above it and say, well, no, that's too like it's too simple of a formulation.
I love this. You're helping me, man. That's really good. I
So
needed to hear
so
that.
yeah. So I think there's actually a real when people are like, oh, I just want to get past dogmas and doctrines or something
Mhm.
like that. And
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not speaking against anyone in particular here. I I think I think it's actually it requires a greater degree of pride to say, or of sorry, not of pride, of humility, of rejection of pride to say like the creed, the Nicene Creed is true. Like I'm going to, it's true enough that I'm going to like
Yes.
I'm going to sing it. I'm going to sing the creed and like affirm it, and I'm going to pray the Apostles' Creed every day, many times a day. Not because it like somehow encapsulates or limits the truth, but
Man,
like
you're
in the
thank
same way
you.
that like my body is my being is a vehicle of an immortal soul, and yet I'm like I'm definitely bounded, right? Materially, I'm definitely bounded in the same way the creed is in some sense linguistically bounded, but that in no way like says that I've exhausted it or that it's limited or any of these things. What it should go the other way around, where we should say, okay, words can be that a vehicle of that sort of mystery and glory. That it's not that I don't miss them. It's not that I understand the mystery and the glory. It's that I don't understand words.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I hear you, man. Okay, first of all, there's like 3.5 minutes on the Zoom call. So do you have time for me to do another
Okay.
section, or are we ending in 3.5 minutes?
Oh man, we're gonna have to end. We're gonna
Okay, let's
we
end.
can definitely just make time in our schedules again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's do
yeah.
a different time.
That was a pretty
And
high point. That's a pretty high point right there.
dude,
Thanks for giving me the last words.